Ashland, Oregon. Late afternoon, November 14th, 2019. It is exactly 6:42 p.m. The corridor of the rural hospital is completely empty. The light of the sunset discreetly passes through the cracks in the windows, projecting golden bands on the polished floor. Everything there seems suspended in time. In front of the door to room 213, a black and white cat sits. The body motionless, the gaze fixed. Don't meow. It doesn't move. He just watches the closed door with an unsettling calm. Across the hall, a doctor is walking hurriedly. When he notices the animal, he stops. Keep looking. His shoulders relax, but his face contracts. There's something about that moment that makes him hesitate. He stares at the cat for a few seconds without knowing exactly why. There seems to be a silent exchange between the two, yet no sound is made, no action takes place. The doctor continues to stand still, observing the scene with a strange feeling of discomfort, as if he had interrupted something that shouldn't be there. As if the animal knew something it didn't know. There, at that moment, everything remains static. Time, light, man, cat. An invisible expectation fills the air. He thinks. He didn't meow. It didn't move. It just stayed there, looking. Have you ever had that feeling that something was watching you, even without seeing anything? Comment below. His name is George Myers, 58 years old, general practitioner, widower. He has worked at that hospital since he was 26. He never moved to another city. I never wanted to. He knows every floor, every nurse, every noise the building makes when the wind gets stronger, and yet there's a weariness in his eyes that doesn't come from decades on duty. It comes from somewhere else. Since 2016, life seems to be in black and white for him. It was that year that he lost his wife, Ava, to a sudden aneurysm. A sweet woman, a music teacher who wore floral dresses even on the coldest days. Since she's been gone, George has lost not only the sparkle in his eyes, but also something more subtle. His faith. Not religious faith. He never had much of that. But faith in people, in purpose, in the coincidences that sometimes give meaning to existence. He spends his days in the hospital and his nights too. He always arrives before sunrise and only leaves when silence takes over the corridors. The routine is always the same. A reheated coffee in a mug with the hospital logo. A disorganized closet with a drawer that he rarely opens, the one that holds old photos, folded letters, a necklace that he never had the courage to throw away. Sometimes a portable radio discreetly plays the same piano chords that Ava used to practice. He never mentioned this to anyone. Maybe you think that as long as that melody is there, so is she. When night falls, the hospital changes rhythm. The footsteps slow down, the lights go out in blocks, and the clock sounds louder than it should. George walks the halls like a ghost at home. Avoid rooms with terminally ill patients. Avoid long conversations. Avoid connections. For him, creating bonds only increases the pain when the inevitable arrives. He learned to silence empathy, not out of coldness, but out of defense. You've already lost more than you thought you could bear. In the doctor's break room, while heating the same coffee as yesterday, he looks out the window without seeing anything. And for a brief second, he allows himself to remember. The sound of a heart monitor coming from far away brings him back. And then he continues, always forward, always trying not to feel too much. Do you also have a corner of the house that holds difficult memories? It was on a day of light rain that it all started, October 21st, 2019. Movement in the emergency ward was calm, with no serious cases, when a small feline body crossed the automatic door as if it knew exactly where it was. Nobody saw him arrive. He simply appeared in the central corridor, his fur soaked but his steps firm. He walked slowly, as if he recognized every direction, every curve of that hospital. The first to notice was Nurse Anna, who immediately tried to shoo him away with quick gestures, worried about hygiene issues. But he didn't react. He stopped, in front of room 108, where an 83-year-old man was in palliative care. Sat down, and it stayed there, Anna insisted. He called another nurse. They took the cat outside twice, but he came back, and he returned to the same place. George watched from afar. At first he found it curious, then uncomfortable. A few hours later, that patient passed away. The next day, the cat appeared again, this time in the south wing in front of room 117. He sat down. It remained. The patient there was also in a terminal condition, and again, hours later, confirmation of death came. George didn't comment, but he started recording the times, the default, the recurrence. With each new appearance, a new farewell followed. The cat made no sounds, didn't ask for food. I wasn't looking for a lap. He just showed up, picked a door, sat down, and waited. Other employees began to notice. Some laughed, finding it all an eccentric coincidence. Others preferred to avoid commenting. There was a growing discomfort, a collective intuition that no one wanted to verbalize. George, in turn, kept his distance, but he watched. I began to write down each occurrence. He began to avoid coming across the animal in the hallways, but he always knew when it was there. It was as if the atmosphere changed, as if the air itself became denser. One of those nights, when he came across Nurse Anna, he broke the silence with an almost whispered question. "Was he here yesterday?" She nodded, without saying a word. The two looked at each other for a few seconds, and in that look there were more doubts than answers. "Do you believe that some animals know more than they let on?" George tried to rationalize. He convinced himself more than once that it was all just a coincidence, that the cat was just wandering around, like so many others do, and that its presence in front of the rooms was mere chance. But something inside him was already starting to crack. It was early in the morning on November 2nd when he passed room 209. He stopped when he saw the animal, once again motionless in front of the door. Inside, a 9-year-old girl, in the terminal stage of cancer, was breathing with difficulty. The cat didn't move away. He sat for hours without looking away. When the day dawned, the team confirmed what everyone feared. The child was gone. George felt a discomfort he couldn't explain. It wasn't just sadness. It was something deeper, more intimate. He started following the cat from a distance. He started taking notes, recording schedules, observing patterns. With each new case, the same sequence. The cat appeared, chose a door, sat down, and waited. And at some point in the following hours, the patient would die. But there was something else going on. While trying to understand the animal's behavior, George began to encounter ghosts that he had long avoided. The images of his wife in bed, her last days in that same hospital, came back strongly. One specific memory began to haunt him. The night Ava had her worst seizure, just before leaving. He had been by her side, holding her hand. But he wondered, now, what if the cat had been there too? Would she have felt less alone? For the first time in years, he mentioned something personal to Anna. A brief conversation, started almost mechanically, but which ended up revealing more than he expected. He talked about his wife, the coincidences, the feeling of impotence. Anna listened with the patience of someone who has seen more than they wanted to. He didn't give answers, but he didn't judge either. For the first time, George realized that perhaps he wasn't as isolated as he thought, but doubt began to grow. If the cat really sensed death, what did that mean? Was it just animal sensitivity, or was there something beyond logic? He, a man of science, trained to trust numbers and exams, felt torn between the reason that has always guided your decisions and something more difficult to explain. On the night of November 13th, the hospital was immersed in that particular silence that only empty corridors can carry. George couldn't sleep. It was after 11 when he saw the cat again, the same black and white, walking alone with light steps, as if he already knew every corner of that place. But this time, there was something different. The animal stopped. In front of a specific door, room 213, George was surprised. That room, as far as he knew, housed Thomas Barclay, 75 years old, hospitalized for a simple urinary infection. Nothing to inspire concern, no signs of risk. The exams were under control, the medication had an effect, no abnormalities. But there was the cat, sitting as he always did. Property, looking at the closed door, waiting. The doctor approached slowly, without making a sound. It stopped a few meters away. He observed the animal, then looked at the display on the wall that indicated the patient's vital signs. Everything stable. He forced himself to push away the thoughts that were beginning to form. This couldn't be happening again. Not there, not with that patient. George took a deep breath, looked away, and walked away, trying to convince himself that it was just an unconscious repetition. A pattern forged by the mind itself. But something inside him no longer believed this version. It was as if he were walking on quicksand. The more he tried to hold on to reason, the deeper he sank into discomfort. Exactly 10 minutes later, an alarm sounded on the floor. Code blues were rarely heard around here at this hour, but the sound was clear, urgent. Room 213, George ran. When he entered the room, he found the team trying to revive Thomas. Cardiac massage, defibrillator, adrenaline, all within protocol. But there was no response. The heart had stopped suddenly, without any prior signs. The patient died at 11:17 p.m. The medical report indicated sudden failure, with no apparent cause. Nothing indicated an imminent risk. Nothing justified death. The atmosphere in the ward changed. There was no talk openly, but everyone seemed to carry the same question in silence, including George. He spent the rest of the morning without sleeping, sitting in his living room, staring at a turned-off computer screen. I tried to reconstruct every moment, every detail. That death didn't make sense. And yet, the cat knew. I knew before anyone else, before science, before the signs. You knew. For the first time, George felt afraid. Not the cat. But what could that mean? Death, which he knew so well from his clinical routine, now seemed to take on another form. A silent foreshadowing, a presence announced by feline eyes, and then came the doubt that wouldn't leave him alone for the rest of the night. If he had taken the signal seriously, if he had done something, could he have prevented Thomas's death? Or was fate, like that cat's visit, inevitable? The next day dawned colder than usual. The sky was overcast, humidity in the air, fallen leaves covering the path between the parking lot and the hospital's side entrance. George arrived earlier than usual, as if something pushed him back to that place before the alarm clock even went off. But when he entered, something was wrong. The silence seemed thicker, heavier, and what caught the most attention was not the movement of nurses, nor the absence of alarms, but the fact that the cat was nowhere to be found. For the first time, since it all started, he was gone. George pretended he didn't care. He went to his office, tried to fill out forms, review medical records, keep his mind occupied with numbers and diagnoses, but between one signature and another, eyes instinctively strayed to the corridor, no sign of the cat. Time passed slowly. The clock on the wall seemed late, the coffee was getting cold too quickly, and the mood inside was one of absolute unrest. Something was about to happen. He felt it. Or maybe it had already happened. Around 3 in the afternoon, George couldn't take it anymore. He dropped the pen on the table, crossed the corridors with hurried steps, and began to look for him. First in the common wings, then on the upper floors. He went through the emergency room. pediatrics, the service stairs. Nothing, no clues. Until, almost without thinking, he left the main building and followed the stone path that led to the back garden, a space forgotten by many, but which Ava used to visit whenever she needed silence. And that's where he found it. Under a small tree next to the hospital memorial, the cat was sleeping, lying on the leaves, curled up, breathing calmly. He seemed at peace. George approached slowly, not knowing exactly why. He looked around, recognized the place, and then he saw it. A metal plate darkened by time, stuck in the ground, with discreet letters engraved on the surface. Ava Myers, 1959, 2016. May your love continue to heal, wherever you are. George stopped. The entire body froze. He had been there so many times, but he had never noticed that the cat frequented that place. And now it all made sense. The animal did not wander aimlessly. He knew where to go. I knew where to stay. And he knew, in some impossible way, exactly what that presence meant to George. Without thinking, he crouched down. He touched the edge of the plate with trembling fingers. The cold of the metal contrasted with the heat rising to his face. The chest felt heavy, the throat closed, and when the tears finally came, there was no resistance. He cried in silence. Not for the cat, not even for Ava, but for himself, for the life that I had been pushing day after day, without ever stopping to feel. The cat slowly got up, walked over, and laid its head on George's leg. A simple gesture, almost imperceptible, but it completely dismantled it. In that instant, he understood. I was no longer alone. Never been, perhaps. He just forgot to look carefully. Have you ever been saved by someone, even without realizing it at the time? In the days that followed, something in George began to change. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, like an atrophied muscle trying to remember how to move. For the first time in years, he began to enter the rooms he previously avoided going to. He sat next to terminally ill patients, and instead of talking about exams or protocols, he asked about their stories. Where did they come from? Who were they waiting for? What they liked to do most when they were well? The clinical view gave way to something rarer in hospital corridors, genuine listening. The cat continued to roam the corridors, but now its presence no longer caused discomfort. Quite the opposite. He was wanted. Nurses stopped to caress him. Children smiled when they saw him pass by. Patients asked him to stay close by, especially on the most difficult nights. And then a name came up. Anna was the one who suggested it first, Bishop. George didn't question it. It felt right. The name stuck. Bishop was now an official part of the team. Although he wore no badge or uniform, George began keeping a voice diary. He recorded everything on a small pocket recorder as he walked through the corridors. Loose reflections, thoughts that previously suffocated, now found a place. One of the recordings said, "He does not foresee death. He offers companionship where loneliness seems larger than life." After saying that, he stopped for long seconds, as if even breathing had changed rhythm. In the palliative care ward, where the atmosphere had previously been somber, something new was now seen. Open curtains, low conversations, a lightness that seemed unthinkable a few weeks ago. Bishop always chose where to be, and when he lay down next to someone, it was no longer an omen. It was a gesture of presence, a sign that until the last second, no one would be alone. George himself went on to visit the garden where Ava was honored. He left flowers. Sometimes he sat in silence with the cat beside him, both looking at the same point on the horizon. There was no need for words. What he feared so much, emptiness, abandonment, loss, now seemed more bearable. There was beauty in it all. There was even peace, and people started to notice. Young doctors were inspired by the way he spoke to patients. Family members were grateful for the welcome, and George no longer refused thanks. I accepted, with humility. with eyes that now saw more than symptoms. Sometimes true heroes don't have a voice, but they know exactly when to show up. If this story moved you, comment below, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who needs to believe again.